Okay, so I've on from the last question there, if we worked out the cube of 4.3, it should be 79.507 cubes, units cubed. So that's how many cubes would fit into that space. So for the 30 cubes here, when we cube root it, the side lengths of each of the length, width, and height should be about 3.01 dot dot dot. That number is important to recognize. That is an infinite decimal that does not repeat. So that happens to be an irrational number. So we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So in general then, if you take a look at the length side of cube A versus cube B, the cube B is not, the side length is not rational. Okay, it is an infinite decimal. It's an infinite decimal, okay, which is what we call an irrational number, a number that can't be put into a fraction. Okay. So this is a big idea here. How is the cube power related to the cube root? Well, the cube power and the cube root are opposites. Okay, so one undoes the other, just like times and divide, add and subtract. So they are opposites of each other, and they are what we call mathematical opposites, and which is very important to understand this idea of opposites. The technical word for this is called an inverse operation. We can undo one with the other. We undo a cube power with a cube root. We can undo a cube root with a cube power. And then we could also say, in general, an nth power and nth root are also opposites. So if I have something like this, x to the power n, and the nth root of x, they are opposites of each other. Okay, so again, they are opposites. And they are what we call inverses. We can undo any power now. So although we're going to focus on cubes, we can do this with any power. We can go to power 4, power 5, etc. So the main idea again also is that what are we dealing with when we cube it? When we cube something, we're starting with a side length and we're ending up with volume. So we start with 3 centimeters side length. We're going to end up with 27 cubes of volume. The cube root is opposite. We start with the volume. If we cube root it, we end up with side length. So if we start with 64 cubes of volume and I cube root it, we end up with 4 centimeters of side length. Okay, so on your calculators, we can work this out. Okay, so if I want to find x, well, the problem with x here is I have x inside a cube root. I really don't want the cube root. I want just x. So how I would undo this is, well, I take the opposite of the cube root, which is cubing something. But this is a balance. If I cube one side, I've got to cube the other side. So the cube and cube root on this left side cancel out, so I'm left with an x. And on the right hand side, I end up with 5 cubed, which is 125. So the opposite would be true here. I've got a cube. I want to undo this cube with a cube root. If I cube root one side, I've got to cube root this side. So what number multiplied by itself 3 times gives me negative 64? Okay, we can do this on our calculator, but we could probably do this without a calculator. Think some number times itself 4 times. Well, it's going to be 4 multiplied by itself 4, but that gives me positive 64. But if I want negative 64, I have to start with negative 4. So my side length, well, we can't really talk about side length, but when we talk about here, we're going from the volume. We're trying to find out the volume here is 125. Here we're trying to find out the side length, which was negative 4.